How's it going, guys? Finally back with another video for you. I hope it turns out to be useful for you. Uh, just before I get started, I'd just like to comment that it's getting kind of old having to warn people to act decently and stop making personal attacks on people that they don't even know. Just basically ad hominem and running their foul mouth and all that. This is a Christian channel. There's decent people and kids that come on here, and they don't want to or shouldn't be subjected to that. So, uh, if that's what you came to do, go find somewhere else to do it. I'm going to go ahead and get into some fallacies for you today. Before we get started, though, I'd just like to comment about arbitrary argumentation, which is just basically making a subjective opinion. Uh, if somebody says, well, I don't think any creationist is credible, well, that's an opinion. And I could say, well, I don't think any atheist is credible. And an easier example is just basically saying, well, they like the color purple. Well, I like the color blue. And we could basically do this all day and get nowhere. And so when you come back with a opposite reaction, it starts to point out just how pointless that argumentation is and how it's not getting anybody anywhere. So that's a really common thing to look for, so that's why I wanted to throw that in there too. Anyway, let's go ahead and get started with the fallacies. Now, a fallacious argument is just faulty argumentation. Basically, it's you might even be right with what you're saying, but the way that you're coming to that conclusion is wrong. So we call it a fallacy. There's all different types of fallacies to not only avoid, but to be able to look for if your opponent tries to use them on you, so that you know how to deal with it. Let's go ahead and get started up. We got the fallacy of equivocation. This is just when words are skewed together with improper definitions. Like a word has multiple meanings and they'll jumble it together. An easy example would be doctors know a lot about medicine. John is a doctor, so therefore John knows a lot about medicine. Now, the reason this argumentation is invalid or fallacious is because there's more than one definition of a doctor. A doctor can be a medical doctor, or it could just be somebody with a doctorate. And a person in that situation probably doesn't know too much about medicine and things like that. So anyway, we got the fallacy of reification, which is when you give improper attributes to a concept or thing. Basically like saying, well, science says so and so, or the evidence speaks for itself. Well, neither science nor evidence can actually speak. And this brings me into another important point that you need to always keep in mind, is that people come to different conclusions not because they have different evidence, it's because they have interpreted the evidence in a different way. That could be different worldview that cause that, or just whatever. But the point is, people can look at the same piece of evidence all the time and come to a totally different conclusion. So there you go. So let's go ahead and jump into the fallacies of presumption. There's the bifurcation or either or fallacy. This is an incorrect assumption that there are only two options available. You might also see this as a false dichotomy, is another way to say that. And an example of that would be like, well, the dog is either black or brown. Now, unless you have some kind of further information to justify why you're saying that it is either black or brown, then that's a fallacious argument. For example, we know that there are white dogs, or there are spotted dogs, there are other options out there. It doesn't have to be either black or brown. So that's a false dichotomy or bifurcation or either or fallacy. Alright, so we also have begging the question, or also known as circular reasoning, which is when you use the conclusion to arrive to itself. An example would be like saying, well, women should be able to have an abortion because women have a right to choose an abortion. That doesn't explain anything. It's just saying the same thing in that case. And there's a lot of cases, but just if you're using your conclusion to arrive to itself, then somebody's probably going to point that out as circular reasoning. So try to avoid that and also look for it from your opponent. We also have the no true Scotsman fallacy, which is dismissing something on biased criteria. For example, the original argument, or the way it's originally written, is, I think, well, no true Scotsman puts sugar in his porridge. And then someone says, well, Angus is a Scotsman and he puts sugar in his porridge. And then the response is, well, no true Scotsman puts sugar in their porridge. Now, this is a bad argument because it's not a requirement to not put sugar in your porridge to actually be a Scotsman. So that's a bad argument. We have the fallacies of relevance, like the ad hominem fallacy. This is a common one. You'll see this in two different ways. One can be an actual just personal attack. Well, he's a liar and he's this and he's that, with nothing to back it up. And you can also see this in the form of making assumptions of why people believe the way they do. For example, saying, well, John is a Christian because he was raised as a Christian. Now, that may or may not be true, but it's faulty logic to just assume that. There could very well be other reasons, and there probably are other reasons than just being raised that way. Let's see, we have the irrelevant thesis fallacy. Just arriving to a conclusion by making an irrelevant point. A good example would be the universe is orderly enough to permit life and be observable, because otherwise we wouldn't be here to observe it. Well, that didn't explain anything. That's just saying we're here to observe it, but it doesn't tell us why at all. Anyway, the straw man fallacy is a very common one, which is you just basically misrepresent your opponent's argument so that you can easily bring it down. But what is the point of arguing against something that nobody was even claiming anyway? Like, for example, Christians believe in a flat earth, and we know that it's a sphere. Well, I don't know. I mean, I guess it's a new thing lately where, like, people say that it's a flat earth for some reason, but that's a pretty new thing, and I don't think many people are really buying into that. Let's see, let's move on to faulty appeals. The appeal to authority, which is just saying, well, so-and-so must be true because this person believes it. Richard believes in evolution, so it must be true, for example. We have the appeal to majority, which is just basically saying, well, most people believe this, therefore it's true. I mean, we would still believe in a flat earth if that was, the way to do science and the way to think of things. We got the appeal to ignorance, which is just arguing that a claim is false because you cannot disprove it. It's like saying, well, we haven't proven that there is not life in outer space, so there must be. You don't have to prove everything to be false to get anywhere. That would be ridiculous. And people think that Christians fall into this, but that's not really what's going on, in my opinion. In my opinion, we're just saying we have reasons to think that there is a God because we're here and different things that we've observed and experienced and so on. But what we would like to see is for somebody to actually prove that naturalism is even viable, even possible, even likely. Any of those things would be a good start. And, that's what we're expecting. And, enough with the cowardly tactics and running from the burden of proof and never knowing anything when the time is right, but acting like you know a lot. It's not really helping the way you guys look when you just become agnostics all of a sudden when you're asked anything, or it's just stop redefining words, stop running from points, and we can have a reasonable discussion and actually get somewhere. But otherwise, we're not. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Just again, let's keep the language clean. Let's keep the discussions reasonable, and maybe some good things will happen from that. But nothing good's going to come from fallacious argumentations and just talking smack on people, basically. I mean, there's no point. So anyway, I hope some of this was helpful to you, and I'll see you soon with the next video or two I'll have coming out here soon. See you guys.